Well, I'm here with Dr. John Delony. Dude,
Hey,
welcome to the
thanks, man.
show.
I'm really grateful to be hanging out.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. I told you I was doing some research on your YouTube, and you get calls from all over the place, all over the world, but the top calls seem to be always about sex, affairs, relationships. Why is that, man? Why are people calling into you when they're struggling with this kind of stuff?
I honestly think that there's no one to go to. It's this strange. Churches have quit talking about it. People fought the schools and said you're not allowed to talk about it, but they didn't backfill that with any sort of insider information or context. And moms and dads sure aren't talking to their kids about it. And so it's been outsourced to like social media, and it's been outsourced towards, instead of asking like your parents or your friends, hey, what's fill in the whatever sex act, they just Google it and then they go down a rabbit hole. And I think they wake up 10 or 15 years later and their brains are mush and their relationships are a mess and they're lonely and they don't know what to do next. And so I have to believe they just don't have a model or a context or anywhere to go and actually get some truthful answers.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely looks that way. I feel the same way even with the work we're doing, where yeah, churches aren't talking about it. It's hard to get in anywhere. I was just telling you, like I being on a show like Mind Pump recently was a huge honor, and I think maybe a sign that things are shifting a little bit because for a long time the doors have been shut in so many different areas. You talk about anxiety, depression, affairs, porn addiction, a myriad of mental illnesses that are really prevalent. Is there one in particular that you say this is the kryptonite of the people that are alive on planet Earth today in 2024? Which one do you think is the
Um,
biggest?
Let me reverse engineer that answer. So I don't think in mass the human body is falling apart. I think we're actually working exactly as we were designed. We've just created a world that we weren't designed to live in. And in fact, I was just a secondhand, so I haven't read the actual study, but I just was hearing the other day that they handed a tribe that a of indigenous people the smartphones, and now the tribe elders are saying these all of our young men are addicted to pornography. Of course they are. Yeah, and here's the deal. It's not their fault. That's how their brains are designed to get this to get sexual interaction to continue the species. And it's also designed to do it in a relational context. When you take the relational context out, you and people get anxious, people get depressed, people get addicted to these what I would call substitute connections, like opiates, like first person shooter games, like social media things, like pornography. That's just a brain working perfectly, dropped in the wrong context, right? And so I think underneath all of that, the two the two big pathologies are certainty and loneliness. And when you don't have humility and you have a group on one side of a political spectrum who's saying this is the way this is, period, and then you have another group on the other side saying the complete opposite, this is the way this is, um, then your body's going to get anxious because it knows that's not true. The other side of it is you're so lonely, and pornography makes you feel a little bit less lonely. Getting that text from a coworker when your marriage is, dude, when you got two kids under the age of 4, of course your marriage is messy. Of course it is. It doesn't mean your marriage is broken. It means it's just messy. And your coworker texts you and she thinks your jokes are hilarious, or he thinks you look nice in that thing the other night. It feels good. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. But we've just dropped ourselves. We've given ourselves these tools and we don't have the skills to navigate them in the 21st century.
Yeah. What do you think the antidote is? Like, do we abolish technology? Obviously, that's maybe not quite going to happen. But do you think maybe we do need to actually mandate some better controls with tech, or how do you think moving forward we? Because I agree. Like the the social media companies, all the big comms, they
Yeah,
know
they're
what they're
better than
doing. They're
us.
tapping into those
Yeah.
dopamine circuits. Yeah, exactly. We're not
No.
going to beat it, so to speak. What do you think the answer is?
It's a fascinating question, and I think you just go backwards. When my relationships are whole, when I'm hanging out with people, and when I'm really engaged in work, and I have a mantra that's come up recently, and it's just a personal mantra, which is, hey, just do what you said you were going to do today. Like I'll go to bed and then I'll be like, tomorrow I'm going to work out. I'm going to do this workout. I'm going to double it. And then I'm going to be on time. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to hang out with my kids. And then I wake up the next morning. I don't do the workout at all. And that starts a cascade of compensatory behaviors. My body has to start duct taping together a plan to cover up the shame and the failure because I didn't even do what I said I was going to do. I'm late to work. I'm anxious. I'm whatever. So when I do what I say I'm going to do, I don't even reach for my phone anymore. I'm talking to real people. My wife and I are having connection, right? We're talking, we're laughing. Me and my kids are sitting with each other. I'm talking with friends on the phone or family members on the way home. I get to my house and I actually am involved in the things that make my house go round, which men often opt out of. I don't spend my evenings letting other grown men play sports for me so that I can feel like I'm a part of something, right? I go outside and play with my kids, or I go help my neighbor with his farm. So it's when I do the things that I know I need to do to be well, it begins to really marginalize these addictions, these, if you will, these technologies that we are using to Xanax over, to Band-Aid over the mess we have in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. In some of the calls that I was listening to that you've taken, the loneliness thing is really prevalent. It's very obvious, and there's lots of data behind that and all of that. Why do you think it's so hard? I think men historically have had it more built in. Like you think about agricultural times where you actually just use an example, right? You're helping your buddy on the farm because I think you're in rural Tennessee, right? Where that maybe is a little bit more built in. But is it just urbanization, or what is it that has allowed men to be, I guess, a lot more disconnected, isolated, and really much harder to form friendships and meaningful same-sex relationships?
This is a gross generalization, but I think it holds. That women form relationships kneecap to kneecap, and men form relationships shoulder to shoulder. And so the old barn raisins, we don't have them anymore. We just hire somebody, or we don't even have a barn, and we don't do hard things together. They're going to benefit you and benefit me, which in turn benefit all of us. We just go to our cubicle every day. So I'm in my car. We even built special roads on our highways that's like, hey, if you'll just get another person to ride with you to work, we'll let you get there 45 minutes faster. And most people are like, nah, I'll just go by myself, right? And so we have this pseudo relationships. Millions of people in America, their bodies, their nervous system knows Joe Rogan better than they know their next door neighbor, because we just put our headphones in and we consume. People listen to this interaction you and I are having, and their bodies are like, I know those guys. I'm good on the relational front. And then you go to your cubicle and you put your headphones on and you do your job. And then you go home and you let other people fight wars for you. You let other people play sports for you. You let other people coach your kids. And so we have just unplugged from our lives. And Huberman's talked pretty eloquently about this. Your body has to have something to push against neurochemically so that it can grow on the back end. The way I'll say it is, when you go to the gym, you have to put weight on the bar or you will never get stronger. If you pull all the weight off the bar, you're never going to get stronger. And so you go to the gym, you got to load it up, and we have to do that with our lives. And if we don't do that with our lives, and we don't do that with other people, your entire social network internally just atrophies. It just goes away. And then your body sounds every alarm it has, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's who knows what, and alcohol or opiates or pornography, it makes those things go away.
Yeah, there's the old adage, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
And that holds
right?
a little bit,
but
yeah. I mean, I think generally speaking, I think there's a lot of truth there.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about tech boundaries with your kids, and we can dive into that. But I actually want to hear about you personally. What do you do personally? Because I have to imagine enough people have your phone number that it could be pretty busy and pretty distracting. What are you doing to manage that in today's
I'll tell you
day and
two
age?
stories. One, when I left higher ed, when I worked in universities for 20 years. When I left, I was a chief student affairs officer at $1 billion university. I had no social media, none, zero, no Facebook, no Twitter, no nothing. So I say that to say you can get to the highest levels of your particular field without being connected all the time. In fact, I got there about 10 or 15 years younger than most people. And I think it's because I could focus on my job and the people I was in charge of caring for. I wasn't distracted all the time. So then I leave and I join a media company. And so now part of my job is on social media. And it was about, so I've had about 4, maybe 3 years. I don't remember, not long. And I was about a year in. I'll never forget this, dude. I was sitting in my closet. The door to my closet was shut. My closet's in my bathroom. The bathroom door was shut, and my bedroom door was shut. The kids are running around out in the living room, and I was just hiding and just scrolling. And I remember looking up, and I just started dying laughing. I was like, "Oh, you guys are good. Y'all got me. Like, you got me. Like, I don't want to be a part of that." And so I just went in here. I went behind the door. I could have been using heroin, doing the same thing. I was just numbing out. And so that was an alarm, a wake up call for me. Hey, Delony, you can know all the neuroscience. You can know all the partridge in a pear tree. You can have sat with all these tech guys. Fine. They're better than you. You can't win. And so I'll show you right here. In my personal life, I have social media on one phone. That's the only reason this phone exists. And then I've got my personal phone over here, and I keep them separate. The best when I'm healthy, my social media phone stays either in the car, at the office, or at the very least in my bag. And I don't take it out unless I'm going to make a post, which means I'm deciding to work at 8 p.m. or I'm deciding to work at 6:45 a.m. or whatever. I'm not great about it, and I can usually tell I need to reconnect with my wife. I need to go hang out with my friends because I'll start picking it up at 7 a.m. or I've been eating crappy or had a bad night of sleep. When it comes to here's I'm just going to be honest as I can. So, like I said, I worked in higher ed for 20 years. Thousands of students have my cell number, and I've kept the same number forever. And a buddy of mine is a country music star, and I called him once, and he had changed his number, and Goofball didn't let me know his new number. And so when I ran into him again, I was like, "Dude, you changed your number?" He's like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." And he gave me his new number. Well, then maybe a year ago, I called him and I said, "Hey, when was the moment when you knew it was time to change your number?" Because people call from all over the place, not to mention all the old people from your past. It's all the new people. And he said 2 things that were really important. Number 1, you can change it at any time. You're not bound by this box. This doesn't own you. You control it. But then he said, or this is so great. He's a hilarious guy. Or you could just be a grown up and not feel like you have to respond to every time, every incoming text message. Like they are knocking on your front door. You don't have a moral obligation to answer the door. And if you do answer it, you got to be present. So wait until you're ready to respond and just respond then. And I started laughing, but that moment freed me. So I have a whole bunch of unread texts, and I'm grateful when people reach out. I don't have a time to spend answering, "Hey, what book should I read? Hey, what do you think of?" I don't have time to do all that. I don't have time to, "Hey, watch this clip." I don't have time to do all that. I do need the time to be a good dad and to be a present husband and to spend some time reading the next journal article. So, and then occasionally I'll be sitting in an airport and I'll go answer 45 texts. Some of them are a month old, and I've stopped apologizing. I don't owe you an apology. I love you. I'll get back to you when I can. And 99.9% of the people in my life get that, and they're super awesome and they're grateful. And the occasional person who's a goofball about it, that's just good data for me next time. But I get to own it, and I just don't lose sleep over it anymore. I've got too much. I'm working too hard to stay in my present moment here.
Yeah. So what do you do now? And I imagine you're not still 3 doors behind in a closet when things are getting out of control. How do you cope? Because lots of pressure. You know, you work for Ramsey Solutions, and Dave's pretty upfront. Like they are an
Yeah.
intense environment, right? You guys are working hard, and I know you have a kid
Yeah.
or a couple kids rather. You're married.
So,
Yeah. How are you coping
well,
with stress?
the biggest stress I have in my job is there's just the competing. There's so many deadlines all the time, right? So that's tough. And my job is carrying people's pain, right? And so there are days that it just adds up, and you get to the end of a month, and it's just like, dude, I can't handle another call about somebody's marriage falling apart or somebody's trying to die by suicide. I'm at capacity, and that's up to me to be a responsible adult to know I got to recharge, right? But I'll also say this place runs really, really hard. Like the company where I work, Ramsey Solutions, the media company, it runs real hard. And when I first started here, the currency at my old job in the higher ed world, in the science world, I was also a grad school professor. So in those nerd worlds, the currency was first in, last out, right? So you get there at 7, you don't leave till 7 or 8. And there's always another article to read, another book to read, another opinion to read. And so I was here, I'd been here about 3 or 4 months, and Dave was doing a really late night media hit. And late night, it was 7 o'clock. I'm such an old man. But I was in there all by myself, just reading some mental health articles. And he walks in to our little office suite and he said, "What are you doing here?" Everyone was gone. And I said, "Oh, I'm just catching up on some of these new articles." And he said, "Go home." And I started laughing. I was like, I will. And he said, he got kind of close and he said, "I'm telling you, get up and go home." And then he said this: "If you're no good there," and he pointed out the door, "you'll be no good here." And then he said, "You will not use the name Ramsey as an excuse to not be a good husband and father. Go home." And here's what I had to do, man. I hadn't been home before 7 o'clock in 15 years. And that meant I had to learn how to be a dad between the hours of 5 and 7:30, because my identity had been, look how hard I work, look how much money I'm going to bring home to the family. And now it was shifting to, I'm going to sit here and play some sort of wolf dragon soccer game with my 5-year-old daughter. And I don't even know what we're doing. I don't know how the rules keep changing. And I just want to take the ball and punt it into the woods. And then my son's like, "Hey, Dad, can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? I got to learn how to do that because I've avoided it. I had gone around it, and it's been transformative. It has been absolutely transformative. And last night, seeing my 8-year-old daughter on her bicycle after she'd already wrecked twice, and I tell her like, "Hey, the only way is to get back on." And she looks up at me, and we're not going very fast, but in her mind, we're going 1,000 miles an hour. And she looked at me and said, "I've never gone this far." Right? Like, man, I'm so glad I was there for that moment. That was better than any like house rehab, reel I could have looked up on Instagram, or like scrolling or what. It was so amazing to be in that moment when she realized, look how far away I am from the house. This is awesome. And that was awesome. So I'm going to make that trade every time, and it's going to be super boring, and it's going to be super frustrating, and it's going to be worth it every single time.
Man, that's really cool. We work pretty hard with our team because we're dealing with pretty serious situations, people with addictions and marriages on the line and all that kind of stuff. So we work hard to teach people how to offload. And it's one thing to keep work at work, like physically. It's another thing to do it mentally and emotionally. And I'm curious for you, what have you done on more the mental side to clear your head? Like when you do reach that point where it's like, man, I can't take another call, like I'm emotionally spent. Is it just being at home that helps you recharge, or are there things you do
Yeah,
personally?
I think everybody has to know the things that they need. Some people need to go for a walk. Some people need to go for a long run. Some people need to go lift weights. Some people need to go just have chips and queso with some buddies. I will say 2 things. One, this is my gang, so I'm going to speak pretty openly and a little bit critically, a lot critically. Often mental health people, we don't practice what we preach. And we get really caught up ruminating, and we have some sort of elevated ideal of ourselves that if we just keep thinking and running over scenarios over and over, we'll be able to solve this person, this client, this patient, this coaching, this person that we're walking alongside, we'll be able to solve their problems for them. And I think that's arrogant, and I think it's incorrect. I think the greatest thing we can do is, if we have some particular knowledge gaps, write them down and go solve that knowledge gap. If we are really struggling because this particular old man that we're sitting with, or this particular young person who's struggling with addiction, reminds us of ourselves or our own situation, that's our work to go do. But the best gift I can give my clients, my patients, the people I show up to see, is to leave their situation in this room as and to go be whole, so that I can show up totally full. And so I always would ask, when I was teaching grad school, when I was teaching counselors in training, I would always ask them, like, what are you trying to solve at home? Why are you letting this person that you just met with today, or these 7 people, sit at your dinner table and interrupt you and your kids' like talking time, or your sexy time with your spouse? Why are you letting this guy in the room? That's weird, right? And when you start thinking of it that way, you have to start saying, okay, I have to have the strength to set this down and secondary traumatic stress is a very real thing, but I think we walk around carrying it as though it's like, yeah, it's a part of our identity. Like, look how tired I am. Look how heavy this is. Look how scary this situation is. And all we're doing is making it very hard for us to show up whole for those people the next time. And by the way, like one of my closest buddies, Dr. Jennings, she studies secondary traumatic stress. It's very, very real, and it will destroy you. It's not an excuse to not go be whole. It's just more impetus. If you decide to do these jobs, if you're a fireman, if you're a nurse, if you're a lawyer, if you're a pastor, if you are working with people in addiction or pornography challenges, if that's you, cool. You have to get sleep. You have to have a group of friends that you don't work with. You have to have a spiritual center. You have to go exercise. You must, or you can't. It's unethical for you to show up in the space with hurting people because you're not ready to be there.
Yeah, it's really true. Really true. Do you? It must be interesting. I'm just thinking about the line of work you used to be in. Is it weird that you don't get to like follow through with people because you're taking one call after another? And I imagine when you're like in an academic setting or educational environment, you know, you get to see people through at least a couple of years, depending on what kind of programming they're in. Is that an adjustment for you?
Yeah, because I used to know I'm sitting with a 19-year-old whose world just exploded. His mom just died. His best friend just took their own, that just died by suicide, right? Or whatever. He just failed the class or just got suspended for a semester for having, cocaine on, like whatever the thing is. I would always know if I keep showing up and he keeps showing up or she keeps showing up, I'm going to give them a hug as they cross that graduation stage one day. Or they're going to shoot me an email from whatever university they ended up graduating from. And so, yeah, there was always the vast majority. I got to close the loop with them. Not everybody. Now my entire life is an unclosed loop, right? Yeah. And so I've had to make peace with, I'm a Christian guy. I've had to make peace with, I get this moment with somebody and then it's my job to walk with them and carry their bags just from like the seats of the airplane to the baggage claim. That's my job. And then I'm going to encourage them to see that guy over there. He'll carry your bags further. And I've had to make peace with that's my job now and be okay with that.
It must change the way you give advice, right? Because you have to kind of be punchy, right? In that little window that you get, as opposed to if you know that person's going to come back through your door again next week, maybe you take your time.
Yeah.
A bit more.
I mean, I think my superpower has always been, making people feel safe. Like, dude, sit down, like have a seat. And so, yeah, you have about 8 seconds to do that now. I think, but on the other side of it, when you're dealing with people who are considering dying by suicide, like you only have a second. You got to get in there and match that energy and feel that energy and be pretty confident that you can reach out and take their hand and, you have a path out for them. And so you have to know the question behind the question behind the question. And you have to know, oh, no, this person's really not safe. And, or this person is just really scared or this person's really alone. And so I think that particular skill has really paid dividends on this show. You just got to get to it. You got to get to it real fast. Cool.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you do have a lot of people who call you that have a secret, right? Like they have a secret affair, they have a secret addiction. Obviously, I mean, Dave's been taking calls for years of people that are secretly in debt and maybe the spouse doesn't know. What's your top tip for somebody who is in that situation to try to walk in the light and still somehow hopefully preserve their marriage or their relationship?
I don't think you can hold the outcomes. You can't control the outcome. You can know that if you hold your breath for too long, you'll die. If you hold a secret for too long, it will kill you. Secrets will kill you. And so I want you to, and you cannot secret your way to a whole marriage. And so knowing that, I want you to do the next right thing today. And the next right thing today is to find somebody that will help you carry this burden you've been carrying around. It's too heavy. And I want you to seek, like for all human history, every religious tradition has some sort of confession component. And I think over the last couple hundred years, we've made confession in the Christian world about tell us all the bad things you've done. That's not what the genesis is. Do you see all of me and do you still love me? And the person across from you will say, I see you and I'm not going anywhere. Right. And so I think, and you're welcome back here tomorrow. And there's a whew, right. And we've lost that. And so you have to find somebody and say that thing out loud. And yeah, I often will ask, like, am I the first person you ever told that? And they'll say, yeah, I've never said this out loud. And that's a testimony to, we have no tribe. We have no people that we trust anymore. We did an internal study here. 7 out of 10 people said their closest friends in the world don't know how bad things are for them. 7 out of 10. And don't know that you're struggling with pornography, don't know that you have a secret, that you owe $80,000 in online gambling, that you don't know that you're about to, like, you just are disgusted by your spouse, right? Like, nobody knows. And we're sharing a bed with these people. We're sharing, like, car rides. We're sharing workspaces with these people. And we're holding on to that. And that the act of the biophysiology of holding those secrets is killing us. And so I think you tell the truth, and then you hold your hands openly and say, will you still love me? Will you rebuild a new marriage with me? But if you go into it, I'm going to save the marriage, then you're going to have to cut corners at some point. And those cutting those corners, those hacks, they'll come back and haunt you later.
Yeah. One thing we do with our clients when they start working with us is we have them start to vision what their life looks like when they're free of porn. And often it is always initially about saving the marriage or whatever it is. And we actually discourage that quite a bit for that exact reason. We'd rather they're a lot more driven by their personal development, their personal growth, maybe their relationship with God, something where, the outcome is maybe a little bit different. But I think that part is really important. Do you think that, because you wrote a book called The Non-Anxious Life, it's right over your shoulder there, and very good timing for that, because you launched it during the pandemic when people were at an all-time high with anxiety. Do you think that there's a good link between, like you talked about how people are getting exposed to a lot of political headlines. I think there's a very strong addiction to controlling the outcome in people's lives. We love being able to control the outcome, whether it's professionally, finances, whatever. What do you think is at the base of all this anxiety that the world is experiencing?
Well, one, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We've just created a world, and I don't think we did it maliciously. I really don't. I think we've just created a world that is based on comfort, and that's based on not hurting and not being in pain. Both of those are great things, but also both of those things are the things that make people, right? Those are being uncomfortable is the thing that allows you to be comfortable long term. And so we've created a world that we can't exist in. The other challenge is, and this one's come to the forefront over the last couple of years. If I rewrote that book, I'd add another chapter. But essentially, I don't think we've realized it, how bad it is. And again, I'm an optimist, dude. I'm a comic optimist, borderline toxic positivity. But, dude, we burned every institution we have to the ground. All of us, especially before COVID, I had some inkling that government people are government people. They're inefficient. They're out for themselves. Yeah, we knew that. But most of us went to bed at night thinking, at the end of the day, they're mostly trying to do what's best for all of us. And they're in there yelling and fighting. Almost all of us understood that our kids are going to go to that school. Are they going to have to sit by a weirdo? Yes. Are they going to learn some things we disagree with? Yes. But those teachers love my kid. And those administrators want my kid to be smart and to learn those things and to learn how to behave and to go on to the next level. Almost all of us believed at the end of the day that our church leaders wanted us to be well and whole. And then you get in the middle of a pandemic and you find out, oh, and we also thought our doctors were all on the same team, all reading the same journals, all with the same hopes and dreams for us. And then you get in the middle of a pandemic and it's like, you got one doctor being like, if you don't do this, you're going to die. And you have another doctor saying, if you do that, you will die. And dude, I'm just a regular dude. I don't know what to do with that, right? And then you realize, oh, your churches are much more about political grandstanding and elevating this pastor to this godlike figure, not serving the least of these, not taking care of hurting people. And our schools became about, yeah, we'll open the schools back up, but you have to put all new air conditioners in all these buildings. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. And by the way, you have to give 9% raises for the next 14. I mean, just what? Has nothing to do with kids. There's nothing to do with these kids. And so I think without meaning to, the thread got pulled on our churches. The thread got pulled on our schools. The thread got pulled on our medical system. The thread got pulled on politics. And I think we're the most untethered generation in human history. We're a bunch of balloons and all the strings have been cut. And I think that's the clamoring for an identity. We have got identity politics. We've got identities all over the place. I think that clamoring is, I have to belong to something. And the best currency you and I both have right now is the worst thing that has ever happened to us is our new label. I'm a this, I have a this, I'm a survivor of this. And that's the only thing we can anchor to, is this bad thing that happened to us or this mean thing somebody did to us. And it's too uncomfortable to tether to, no, I'm an entrepreneur, I build. I'm a great, great father who's not perfect, but I'm always like, that's too hard. We don't have a map for that. So I'm a guy who was bullied. I got treated this way. I was the wrong this. Might have enough money growing up. My dad should have done this when he didn't. And then now we're 35 and 45 and 55 and our bodies are melting down because we're not anchored to anything.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I used to do research in a university, and I remember a friend of mine was doing some groundbreaking research at the time in his field, and he had a peer-reviewed article like that was just getting peer-reviewed, and one of his peers had made the same discovery and wanted to get his paper out first, so he like did a bunch of fault finding. It was totally ill-founded, but it delayed the launch of my friend's paper. And of course, that guy got his paper out first. And I remember that was the first time where I was like, wait, so this university is not just about education and furthering, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you realize there's a system, there's humans that run this system. And, yeah, I feel like we feel more disheartened about that kind of stuff now.
Well,
than
we
ever
can see it
before.
more, right? It's always been going on for all of human history. It's been going on.
Yeah.
We just have these little fancy digital boxes where we can take pictures of it and send it all over planet Earth with one little, you know what I mean? And so it feels like it's happening way more than it ever has, and it's happening to everybody all at the same time. It's not true at all. Not true at all. In fact, there's probably greater transparency right now than ever before in human history. It just feels like, oh yeah, because those things sell. Those things gin up our fight or flight response, and then we freak out and then we buy things. And so I get it, and I'm not even mad at the media companies. I, as the adult, I, as the parent, I've got to take responsibility for what I need to do to be whole in my house, in my neighborhood, in my community, in my church, in my school, etc.
Yeah, I liked what you were saying about the identity piece, because that's like the third pillar of our recovery process. I think it's massive. And I'm not a huge fan of the I'm Sathiya, I'm an alcoholic, like kind of wearing your...
I'm a huge 12-step fan.
Really
that's the one that I just cannot get
exactly.
through. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I find that that's actually very common thinking these days. It's like, oh, well, I'm an Enneagram 3, so I can't do that.
No, I'm a maximizer, so
like
I just can't be on time. You're like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you help? Like, how do you, because I imagine this is part of maybe the work you do on these phone calls even. How do you get people to unwind their maybe false identities and tether to something that's a little bit more foundational?
I think it's about teaching people that they are way more than they think they are. And part of my work over the last 20 years in universities was working with students with special needs or learning exceptionalities. They had some big challenges. And I always said, your challenge is a context, not an excuse. If you want a law degree, it would be unethical for us to hand you a diploma and you did this amount of you didn't do this work, you didn't take these exams, you didn't pass these things, and you're going to roll in and help a single mom. She's going to come to you and say, someone's trying to take my kids in my home, help me. I would be evil if I did that. And so I have to look you in the eye and say, it's going to really be hard for you. It's hard for everybody. It's going to really be hard for you. Or me, my clinical nerd diagnostics are that I have OCD and some sort of generalized anxiety disorder. Fine. That just means that I get anxious about things. So I got to be careful. I got to find out what are those things that set me off. I also have to make peace with how my body deals with stress. And so, dude, I check the locks 3 or 4 times at night. I don't fight myself. I usually use that moment in the dark to scroll Instagram when I'm going up and down my stairs, just taking a lap. I don't fight it. And I got to be on time for work. And I got to be on. So it's up to me to get up 10 minutes earlier. It's not up to my boss to, well, Delony's making laps around the house again. That's not their job. That's my job, right? It is a context, not an excuse. And so if you are somebody who is really struggling with attraction and feeling alive in your own marriage, got it. And you're somebody who works in tech and you know how to hide everything. Cool. You do. You have an easier off-ramp to a quick relational Band-Aid in the form of pornography. Good on you. That's not an excuse to go use pornography. It's a context, right? You need to deal with your relationship. You got to have some hard conversations. It may blow up the whole thing. Cool. That's your path. That's your job. And if you avoid that thing, your body's going to get reinforced, and that off ramp's going to get wider and easier to travel because your body knows that's an easier, safer path than this. And then you're going to find yourself addicted and then in a mess. So it's a context, not excuse, man. And I only around me, one of my favorite guys to read back in grad school is an old psychiatrist. A lot of his stuff didn't age well, but his core principles were extraordinary, exquisite. It's William Glasser. And he would always say he's a psychiatrist, and he wouldn't let his clients say, I have anxiety or I'm depressed. He would make them use the affirmative. I'm depressing. I'm anxietying. I'm back aching. I'm head aching right now. I am knees hurting right now. And so he made them talk in a language that said, okay, my body is doing this thing to try to protect me. Let's get to the root of that. Let's don't say you have some sort of malady as that's your identity. And so people around me, I only let them use the identity of who are you going to be? And then we're going to back in, we're going to reverse engineer. What are the things you got to do to become that guy or to become that woman? I'm a great dad. Cool. What does that mean? What do you got to do every day to become a great dad? Because that's who you are.
In religious communities, I feel like people would fight you on the like, John, you shouldn't be checking your locks 3 to 4 times a night, man. You don't need to do that. What's that line between accepting your limitations or the body you're in and the way it responds versus, trying to change and not becoming a victim to it either of like, this is just the way it is. I have to imagine there's some sort of balance.
Of course it is. Man, people in religious communities want to fight me on a lot of things, dude. There's a long line there.
Me too.
Well, it's just so moronic. Like the whole world's burning down and we're shooting each other inside over whose fire extinguisher is the better one. Like, this is so dumb. Just start spraying your fire extinguisher, guys. Let's put the fires out. But I think you have to, in those situations, like, so the definition of addiction, right, is a behavior you continue to do despite adverse consequences. I'm going to continue to do it even though doing this hurts me. And so if taking a few laps around my house while I check my email before I go to bed, which is that wise? No, it's dumb, but I do it anyway. Is that hurting anything? No. And so it's a thing I'm not going to sit down and try to pray it away. If I was having to make 44 laps and I've sat with those people, or I'm washing my hands and they're bleeding, right? That is a point when I'm continuing to do a thing that is just disrupting and destroying my life. I am then going to get in there and dig into that. There are parts of I'm a very my tendency is to ruminate, and when I ruminate hard, when anxiety meets OCD on the dance floor and they really lock up, bro, I can become electric to be around. I can be very hard to be around and very kinetic. And so that's on me. That's the work I've done, right? Because I want to be a safe place for my daughter to land and for my wife to land and for my son to land and for my neighbors to land. And that means I got to get in there and do the work so that those two goofballs never meet up on the dance floor. That's my job.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm guessing there's probably some trial and error, right?
Every day's trial and error. And anybody that says, I've got this thing figured out, they're lying to you. Like Dave, on the Dave Ramsey show, there's the debt-free scream, right? Like, I don't have any more debt. I'm debt-free. There's never going to be an anxiety-free scream because anxiety is just in a smoke detector. It's just an alarm. I don't want to live in a house without a smoke detector. That's insane. And so I'm never going to have a depressed-free scream. My body has a mechanism for shutting the system down when it needs to be shut down for a while. That's good. It's when that shutdown is costing me my marriage and my job and my relationship with my kids that it becomes something that I need to go get some. I need to get some help. I need to call some people, and that's when it's hurting me, right? But yeah, I've decided to stop going to war with my body. God made me, and that's the way we roll. And I believe in a lot of the, and I don't have the data right in front of me. But if you go back and look at some of the conversations around tribes, there's sleep archetypes. There's certain people that wake up really early and they want to go to bed early. And there's others who wake up later and they get the best work and thinking done later on into the. Well, if you think about 200 years ago, there was no light bulbs. You needed part of your tribe that liked to stay up and get stuff done, and you need part of your tribe that got up real early. And there's people who can just sense and feel. A 10 to 20%, that's the artist, that's the poets. You need those people to be like, hey, I think something bad's about to happen. You need those people, and you need a warrior class. And you like, so man, I'm not going to fight my body. This is the way I'm wired up, and I'm going to be a good steward of it to the best of my ability.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting a sleep tangent in this interview, but I have to just say really quick, I just listened to like, I don't know, 13 hours of Dr. Andrew Huberman
Walker,
interviewing Matt Walker, the sleep
yeah.
specialist. Yeah. And they got talking about this, and he talked about how, like, I think there were 4 or 5 different chronotypes that he outlined, but that was like the most liberating piece of the whole 12 hours for me, because I just realized I've been trying to like fit this, I've been running a business for a few years now, and I was trying to fit this typical like entrepreneur sort of sleep cycle and schedule, and it was just beating me down. Yeah. And as soon as I started sleeping at like what I knew was actually the most natural time for me, I just feel like $1,000,000. My sleep quality is way better.
And
it's just funny
your
how we get
archetype
in
is a
those
context,
traps.
not an excuse. If you have a big call with somebody with an investor in India, and it's going to be at 11 p.m., you got to get up and make that call, right? And it might cost you. This morning, Mike Rowe, the old from Dirty Jobs, was in. He's a buddy of mine. He was in to be on my show this morning. Well, he's got a new a movie coming out. I didn't sit down. I didn't get done with my family responsibilities until 10 o'clock last night. So I sat down to watch his movie from 10 to midnight. Dude, I go to bed at like 9:30 every night. And so I was a haggard mess this morning. That's awesome. That was a one-time thing that I needed to do to honor a guy who's given up a big chunk of his time to do me a favor. And that's part of the job, right? It's a context, not an excuse. I couldn't have woke up this morning and been like, hey, man, I didn't watch your stupid movie because, my chronotype is a horse instead of an eagle. And like, come on, do your job. And I think that leads to a bigger societal challenge, which is we were all raised with nonsense like follow your passion. Just do whatever's passionate about. We were raised with nonsense like know your workplace and your local geography and your local sports team and your local concert halls and the local housing market. They should bend and cater to you. What house do you want to live in? What job do you want to do? And where do you want to do this? That's just not how reality works. Right. And so, like, if you have a chronotype where you wake up really, really early, and you really want to be a nightclub, you're going to have to, at some point, choose reality. That's going to be tough for you. If you really struggle with detail, yet your dad really wanted you to be an accountant and you're in year 3 of accounting school, just know now you're going to fight yourself until your body either quits or you just have that quiet life of desperation, right? And so I think it's just being honest with sometimes you can't live in that town, in that size house, and be an editor of, a sports magazine. Like that all doesn't work, right? There's just reality. And maybe you have to get a different job. Alex Hermosi, the entrepreneur guy, he's always posting everything up. He can't, but he had I was a militant morning routine guy to the point that I had a couple people come over and watch to see if it was true, dude. And I was maniacal.
Give me the
crux
bro,
I'd
of it.
get up
What
at
was
like
the most maniacal part of it?
4:22, and then I would go do a cold plunge, and then I would lift, and then I would meditate, and then I would like whatever. I was just an idiot. All those things are good, but it was like, if I don't get this thing, and then all of a sudden upstairs, my kids are growing up and having breakfast without me, right? But like I'm snapping to a Slim Jim. But it was Alex who was like, bro, the whole reason I work as hard as I do so I can have freedom. And if I exchange freedom, if I don't want to work for this boss, or if I work really hard and get financial freedom, which allows me to buy the most precious thing on planet Earth, which is time, or it allows me to love and honor my neighbors because I can tip $500 at Denny's, right? Like I can just help people with their mortgages. I can do so much. But if I unhook those hooks and I'm free, and then I hook them to a morning routine of my own making, what a moron, right?
Yeah.
Right. So then it goes back to the identity. I'm a guy who is a good steward of the body God gave me. That means I work out most of the time. That means I eat right most of the time. That means I get sleep most of the time. And that's stewardship, right? And I don't give 100% of
Yeah.
all of the money I make away because I can't eat, but I'm a good steward of it. I give away a lot of it, right? So it's just going back to what's your
Yeah.
identity. And then if your identity's in my morning routine, you're going to have a miserable life.
What do you think like a healthy identity is constructed of? Are there certain elements that you feel like if somebody says I am XYZ, you can tell, okay, that's actually a pretty solid stance?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think the solid identities are found in the things. Um, I think there's a couple that are innate, and then I think a couple are ones that we opted into. So if you have chosen to look at another person and say, "Till death do us part," I do, then you have stepped into a role, and so your identity needs to be, because you chose this. I am the best possible husband I can be. I'm the best possible wife I can be. I got to do the things that I got to do to make that come true. If you choose to have sex with somebody and have a kid, then one of them better be, I am an extraordinary father. And now, if you didn't have a dad, or your dad beat the crap out of you, or you were one of 19 kids and your dad didn't know your name, whatever your story is, great. What are you going to do right now to learn what being a dad looks like, what it means, and how is it lived out every day? I don't care what your YOLO is. Like, what does that look like for you? And then the inherent ones are all of us. All of us are worth being loved. And so if one of your core principles is not, I am someone who is worth being loved, which means I'm worth taking care of, I'm worth raising my hand and saying I'm not okay, then you're going to have some challenges. And we all have physical bodies. And so if one of your identities is not, I am a good steward of my body, both mentally, both physically, both emotionally, if I'm not a good steward of that, none of the other things are going to work, right? There's a reason Jesus himself was like, man, I don't have a place to go to bed. I need to sleep. Like, I don't have a place to sleep, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears slightly here
And
because
you're getting on all
one of
my
my favorite
soapboxes
things.
today, man. You're getting me all
I'm on
fired up,
all of
man.
them. Let's do it. Okay, I love comparing addictions because obviously pornography addiction is sort of like kind of like the wild wild west, right? Like everybody agrees that gambling's an addiction, video game addictions in the DSM-5, alcoholism, cocaine, whatever. And then pornography, like academics and researchers just can't get along about it. Obviously, we know, from the work we do, it's definitely an addiction. But I like comparing it. I like comparing it to other things and just saying, what's worse, cocaine or pornography or, whatever. I noticed you've brought in a bunch of people to talk about addictions. Like you had a fascinating interview with John Christ and um, so many different addictions out there. And obviously in the clinical psychology world, anything can be a process addiction, right? You can get addicted to any process and it's a certified addiction. But I'm just curious in all the years of experience and, now all the calls you're taking, is there one addiction that you're like, man, that one's pretty gnarly. Like if I hear that somebody's got this going on in their life and they're addicted to it, maybe your ears perk up a little bit more, or they're gonna have to fight this with a little bit more veracity. Anything like that come to mind,
Yeah,
or is that hard? Is that an unfair
I
question?
think it's two-sided. I think this is probably not going to be the answer you want, but any addiction that is shame-based or any addiction that gets rewarded. I actually think the addictions that get you the pats on the back are the hardest, because if you're addicted to cocaine, getting off cocaine is a nightmare, right? I've sat with those. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Getting off heroin, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And you can create a world where you don't have access to cocaine. You don't have access to anything. If your addiction is to work and achievement, we'll give you $1 million, right? We'll pat you on the back. And I guess not quite that far, but it's not disordered eating. You can't just get rid of food. You have to make peace with food because you have to have it to live. And that's a different level of addiction. That's a different challenge because you can't just never go in that room again. I got to go through that room every single day. So I got to have a different kind of peace. And so I think those that we get these extrinsic rewards, or those that give us this illusory sense of control, like disordered eating, like power, rage, like some sort of anxiety disorders that are kind of out there. Like it feels like I've got this pretend control over all the variables out in the future. I think those are hard because you have to make peace with them because the future's coming, right? Food's coming. The other ones are really, really gnarly at the biochemical level and at the relational level. And some of the things like Gabor Mate is really eloquent about this, but some of the things you do when you're down a meth rabbit hole or you're down an opiate rabbit hole to then get back on the loop to get the money that you need to go get like that shame-based stuff is really, really tough. But man, I think it's tough. I'm talking it out in real time, but I think it's really tough for the ones that are destroying our families and your buddies are like, yeah, did you see this? And they send you the next porn link. Like those are hard.
Yeah, it's really true. Really true. When you look at the mental health landscape over the next, let's call it 10, 15 years, what do you think needs to happen for it to improve and head in a more positive direction?
I'm going to be thoughtful about this answer. Um,
I can buy you some time. Because I think what's happened in the last 10, 15 years is people are very open about it. And I feel like we're in this weird middle ground where, like we were talking about earlier, people are making
yeah.
identities out of it. People are, at least we're talking about it, at least we're doing research about it, but it does feel very muddled sometimes, very convoluted. I think that's partially why people call into you as well, because you bring so much clarity so quickly. And I think we need that, especially in the conversation around mental health, something that's so, complex and sometimes
Yeah.
ethereal. But yeah, I mean, with technology and all the things that kind of, intertwine, what do you
Um,
think?
I'll say a few things out loud. So I think we're going to see a resurgence of behaviorists. I think we're at the end of a couple of 100 years where we thought we could think our way to better mental and emotional health. You can't. You have to do stuff differently. Thinking about it is important, and reflection is important, and cognitive processing and going through, where does this story come from, and these thoughts, and which thoughts am I? All that's important. What are you going to do next? That's important. And I think that we have just thrown behavior out with the bathwater because it was really reductionist. Um, and so I think A, there's that. B, we have to unpathologize every human experience. If your mom dies, you're not depressed. You're sad. You're supposed to be sad. That's a part of it. If you go to college and you unplug from your whole family system, even if that family system was abusive, if you unplug from your family system and your church system and your high school, and you go 8 hours away and get dropped in a box with 300 other people, you're supposed to be anxious. Your body would be drastically underfunctioning if you were not anxious, right? And so that's not a reason to go get on anxiety meds and to go have to see therapists and have to go plug back in and it's a oh man, I got to go meet some friends. I got to go play intramurals. I got to just go be awkward because that's the path forward, right? So I think depathologizing everything. And the third one is mental health practitioners have got to stop pretending that they are medical professionals. There is such a desire to have credibility and to get paid. And the only way to do that was to become part of the medical system so we could get in the insurance system. And so then we started using words like clinical mental health instead of just like, dude, I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist. I walk through with people. And so I think we have to say, you know what, I'm opting out of that system and I'm going to sit with hurting people. And I know that comes with a ton of challenges for how do you get paid and all that. But I think that has to be the case moving forward. And I think medical professionals are wrestling with that too. And probably the last thing, if I look in 10 or 15 years, my hope is there is a dramatic resurgence of human beings getting in the room with other human beings and just saying, hey, my name is John. How are you? And I think you have nervous systems that begin to relax, and they're walking around anxious and walking around depressed and walking around mad and walking around enraged and walking around conspiracy theorists, and all that stuff just starts to, all the air leaves those dramatic balloons because I'm a part of a tribe. I'm a part of a gang. And we don't have that. Kind of like there's processed food everywhere, and I have to be intentional about choosing to eat healthy. And we have made everything easy, so I don't have to walk 9 miles to get water. So I have to get on an assault bike in the morning and work out real hard. I think similarly, we don't have to get in a room with everybody. I can do all my work via a 14-inch screen and in my bedroom. I have to then be awkward and go initiate human contact. And that's just the world we live in right now. Cool. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to be upset about it, but I'm going to go get in a room and go be weird.
Yeah. Dr. John Delony, thank you so much for your time today, man. This is such a fun
You're
conversation.
awesome. Thanks for pushing every button I've got. That was awesome, dude. Hey, blessings to you. Appreciate
My
you so
pleasure.
much.